My name is Rick Haskell, and today we're going to take a look at labor market marginality, or the principle of marginality as it's applied to the labor market. In this series, we're going to look at several different items. We'll start by looking at a simple sandwich shop. Then we'll take a look at marginal product of labor, then total product of labor. We'll then look at marginal revenue product of labor, and then we'll look at marginal expense of labor, and finally marginal revenue product of labor and the labor demand curve. So let's first take a look at a simple sandwich shop example. So let's assume that we have a sandwich shop. I've got this kind of lined out over here. It's a very simple little shop. It's very small. We've got a little entry for our customers to come into and to stand here and wait and be served and have their orders taken. And then we have some very limited space back here where employees might stand. This is a tiny, tiny little sandwich shop, and we have our organization here. We've got our breads and our cold cuts and our condiments and our packaging and everything here. And so we're going to take a look at this and think, what can labor do and what can labor produce in this shop? So let's assume that we're going to start with just one worker. And so if we have our units of labor and our quantity output of sandwiches in this case, and with one unit of labor, that would be me if it's my sandwich shop, then I'm probably being able to produce 15 or sandwiches an hour, let's say, and that's if I'm really working hard. Now remember, as I'm producing this, I'm also serving the customer. I'm taking orders from the customer, so I'm selling, serving, cleaning, collecting the money from the customer and everything. So I might be able to do, we'll say, 15 sandwiches an hour. Well, let's assume for a minute that I decide that there's more market that I could serve, and I bring another worker into the sandwich shop. So there's two of us. And with two of us, this is enough space. We can move back and forth pretty readily. And our technology is, we've got our breads and cold cuts and such here. We've got condiments. We then serve them here. So this is not exactly a Subway-like operation where we've created a production line. This is just a super simple sandwich shop. And we have some things we might need to consider here in terms of our assumptions. So one of our assumptions is that capital is fixed, which also means that our technology is fixed. And let's assume that the price of a sandwich, we're going to sell it to the open public, so every sandwich that goes out of here, we're going to get $5 for that. And let's assume that the wage that I pay myself, as well as the wage I might pay any additional employee, is at $10 an hour. So we're going to, throughout this series, we're going to assume these items. So here we are. Myself, I can do 15 sandwiches an hour, but I'm the chief cook and bottle washer. I'm doing everything. And I decide there's more market that I can serve. I want to increase my quantity because I'd like to have some profitability in this. So I bring on another worker. There's two of us now. And this other worker should be able to provide more sandwiches per hour than I can, because now this other worker doesn't have to do the selling and everything. They're just building sandwiches. So in this case, that worker can add an additional 30 units of sandwich, which means we're now going to, can add 20 units of sandwich. So now we're going to be able to produce 35 units. And a third worker, perhaps, if we like this, we've gone from 15 to 35. That seems better to me. We probably have a lower cost per unit for the sandwiches we're making. So I like this. I say, well, let's bring on a third worker now. And that third worker is going to share our space back here. You know, we're starting to get a little bit jammed up back here. Unless we start to try to change our technology, which we won't because we've assumed technology and capital are fixed in this example, we're going to start to kind of cross over each other a fair amount, but we can try to be cooperative, coordinate, and see what we can get done. But then I think that this additional worker can bring an additional 20 sandwiches per hour into my sandwich shop, so I like that. Certainly worth the $10 wage at a $5 sandwich price. But afterwards, I observe that this additional worker only gave me an additional 10 sandwiches. That's a little bit disappointing to me, but I'd like to make more money. I realize there's more market, so I hire yet an additional worker. And now you can already start to see this is starting to get really kind of jammed up back here. Very difficult for these workers to cooperate without changing technology. But in this case, the additional worker brought me 5 additional sandwiches, so I'm now at 50 sandwiches. If I continue to do this, I'm going to see that the addition of yet another worker back here is not going to give me any additional sandwiches. In fact, if I add a fifth worker back here, we're going to make the assumption that a fifth worker doesn't increase the sandwich count at all, so the output, the marginal output doesn't change, and we're still a sixth worker causes us to actually produce fewer sandwiches. So instead of going from 45 to 50, as we went from 3 to 4 workers, as we go from 4 to 5, our sandwich count remains at 50, and as we go from 5 to 6, our sandwich count actually falls to 45. The whole concept of marginality in economics, certainly in labor economics, is measuring the change in outcome by adding an additional unit of input. So in this case, the unit of input is labor. So adding an additional unit of input for labor is going to give us what kind of change in outcome. And in this change outcome is measured in product. So the marginal product of labor, our product being the quantity. So when we look at this, we're going to take a look at a equation that's going to be something like this. The marginal product of labor is going to be equal to the change in quantity given some change in labor. And we can already see this begin to develop, and we'll look at this with some numbers and some other inferences behind it in the next section.